Assalamu alaikum. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Amma ba'du fa'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wa'tasimu bihablillah jami'un wa la tafarraqu. And hold fast all together by the rope of Allah and be not divided. Surah Al-Imran. It was the 23rd of March, the year 625, only a year after the Battle of Badr, in which 3,000 Qurayshi Meccans led by Abu Sufyan and Khalid bin Walid, with revenge on their minds, marched towards Medina with one goal: to annihilate the Muslim Ummah and their beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It was on the eve of the Battle of Uhud that our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam devised a masterful plan to use a high mountaintop located just outside the outskirts of Medina that would prove to be an X factor in the war. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam assembled 50 of the best archers in the Muslim army, and he told them, "Do not leave this high mountaintop until permission is granted." And he told them that even if they were to witness during the Battle of Uhud their fellow Muslim brothers defeated, martyred, with vultures eating the flesh off of their back, to still not leave that mountaintop. The renowned, famous Chinese military strategist and philosopher named Sun Tzu, he once famously penned that he who occupies the high ground will fight to advantage. This statement did not just hold true in the Battle of Uhud and countless battles throughout the history of the world, but metaphorically speaking, using the highest of grounds as an advantage has always been the case for a true mu'min, as taught to us by the promised Messiah, alayhi salam, in his spiritual treasures, that when we drop to the lowest and the most humblest position of prayer, the sajda, the promised Messiah says, when we recite, Subhana Rabbiyal Allah, Subhana Rabbiyal Allah, that glory be to Allah, the Most High, that we should imagine Allah to be at such a high, astonishing ground, that it is only His being that is capable of seeing what obstacles lay before us. And then the promised Messiah goes on to explain when we raise up out of sajda and we recite, Rabbi khfirli warhamni, that we should not only ask for forgiveness for succumbing to some of these threats and temptations, but to Allah the Most High we should ask for protection, for security to safeguard us from all those evil threats and temptations that come before us. Because it is only Allah who has the ultimate vantage point and the ability to not only see, but grace us with His help and save us from these evil threats and temptations that come before us. Brothers and sisters, this day and age, as we live in a life of ever-rising materialism and worldliness, we are being bombarded with threats and temptations, both seen and unseen. Truly blessed we are, though, to have the institution of Khilafat for the last 113 years, and to have the most holiest man on earth being blessed countlessly, supported by Allah with victories, serving selflessly for us and mankind from His high ground. Khilafat al-Masih is simply armed with prayers of pens, simply armed as Khilafat al-Masih from his high ground with arrows of prayers and pens. Ever so vigilant is Khilafat al-Masih in his defense for us, constantly guiding us, warning us, and shielding us from the consequences of these threats and temptations. Threats and temptations that have been so poetically expressed in Urdu by the promised Messiah, alayhi salam, in which he's written in Dura Samin, Siddak se meri taraf aao, isi mein khair hai. Siddak, come my way with true sincerity, for this is the only way, isi mein khair hai, for this is the only way you'll find peace and contentment. Hai darinde har taraf, main afiyat ka hoon hisar. Darinde, there are beasts everywhere, the Messiah explains to us. Beasts, evil and wicked temptations in every direction you look. Main afiyat ka hoon hisar, that my teachings, my way, are the only true shield and protection for you from the impending disaster that would be caused if you fall victim to these threats and temptations. It was also once recorded that our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had said that the Imam is a shield behind whom a believer fights. Brothers and sisters, this hadith and this couplet serve as a stark reminder for Ahmadis that all our actions and the direction of our spiritual battle, both internal and external, are to come from Khilafat. We must follow the lead of our Khalifa with true obedience and stay behind his shield, for there's no doubt our well-being lies in this pathway alone. Let us take a closer look at some of the darinde of this day and age and see how beloved Huzur has been at the forefront of recognizing these threats to our morality and ever vigilant in advising us and guiding us from the consequences of these evils. How many of us in the last 2 years have been pitched from a colleague or a friend, maybe even someone in the Jamaat, the get-rich-quick scheme of cryptocurrency? I'm sure many of you heard the name recently, Sam Bankman-Fried, the boy wonder-face of crypto, a 30-year-old who founded one of the biggest cryptocurrency exchanges in the world called FTX. At its peak was worth an estimated $32 billion. And then all of a sudden, just this past month, within a week, his company collapsed, filed for bankruptcy, and left his image and his company in ruins. And as he awaits his court date, having been charged for fraud by the Security Exchange Commission, it is also being reported that millions of people and billions of dollars have gone missing. And then just recently, news outlets reported the 5th cryptocurrency boss was found dead. 4 of them mysteriously 4 weeks from one another, the latest having been found drowned in a nearby beach from his mansion, hours within sending paranoid tweets that the CIA was after him. All we have to do is flash back just 2 years ago, and I'm sure many of you recall the circular that was sent out by the Jamaat, in which beloved Huzur first warned us of the risks associated with cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and advised us that despite the success stories and the temptations to get rich quick, to stay away from this form of gambling. And he took it further, and he told us to advise those in our social circles that they are at risk of financial loss. As I searched for this Jamaat circular online, I happened to stumble across it on an online Reddit post. And most ironically, the most upvoted comment to the Jamaat circular on Reddit reads as follows: "The Jamaat is clueless as usual. LOL. Bitcoin used to be worth peanuts." And he wrote this 2 years ago. "Bitcoin used to be worth peanuts, and it's currently trading at over $40,000. Bitcoin is supposed to be a very long-term investment. It's expected to be worth $70,000 to $90,000 in a year or two, he predicted. Brothers and sisters, a quick Google search will show you that Bitcoin has fallen. It's not worth $40,000. It is worth $16,000 today. You couple this with the recent downfall of FTX, these mysterious murders of crypto bosses, does it not prove once again that it is the shield of Khilafat where our safe haven lies? How many of us have heard or seen an advertisement on their phones recently that's convinced you that your phones have been listening in on your conversations? Nowadays, all our swipes, likes, online purchases, all of that data is being collected into a $1 trillion industry that many believe to be the most powerful asset in the world today. Facebook, Insta, Snap, TikTok, all of these platforms that were created to connect us have all now been weaponized. Netflix came out with a documentary called The Great Hack, in which it laid out ways in which Cambridge Analytica, a political consulting firm, was using data from Facebook users without their knowledge or consent. Brittany Kaiser, the key whistleblower from Cambridge Analytica in the documentary, is quoted as saying, "We bombarded them through blogs, websites, articles, videos, ads, every platform you can imagine," she says, "until they saw the world the way we wanted them to, until they voted for our candidate." Again, simply flashback 14 years ago, when beloved Hazur first warned us of using Facebook and said that it was not, in fact, it wasn't just a growing danger that we should avoid. At the time, it was a direction that many people in the world were not ready for. And many people in the Jamaat scoffed or laughed at the stance being taken by the Jamaat. Back then, beloved Hazur had said that these days a new method of introduction has been created on the computer and the internet called Facebook. Though it is not that new, I had previously discouraged you from this practice, Hazur says. I had said in my sermons that it encourages immodesty, it shatters boundaries amongst people, boundaries from one another, it exposes secrets, and it invites indecency. Another one of Netflix's Emmy-awarded documentaries, many of you may have seen, called The Social Dilemma, sheds light on the well-known fact that social media companies succeed by capturing as much of our attention as possible, and then they go on to sell that data to the highest of bidders. As the saying goes, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. This has led to an epidemic of distraction sickness, an epidemic where we are losing hours of our day clicking and swiping on random nothingness. An American psychologist named William James is quoted as saying, "Your life experience is what you choose to pay attention to." Brothers and sisters, if we're going to spend hours of our day swiping and clicking on these gadgets and allowing companies to capture and manipulate our minds, how in control of our lives can we truly be? The manipulation of our minds through societal pressures, this is not a foreign threat for us here in the U.S. Jamaat. It was 35 years ago in 1987 that Khalifa Rabi stood in Detroit, Michigan, and highlighted the tension between Pakistanis and African Americans in our Jamaat to be an inferiority complex. Our Jamaat back then was advised and admonished to break the chains of societal and psychological oppression through the light and character of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This day and age, we are being attacked by similar chains of societal and psychological oppression. It's just in a much more deceitful way, through social media's manipulative powers. The Holy Quran even touches on this point. In Surah Al-An'am, verse 117, وَإِن تُتَكْسَرَ مَنْ فِي الْأَرْضِ يُضِلُّكَ عَنْ سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. And if thou obey the majority of those on earth, they will lead thee astray from Allah's way. Brothers and sisters, the reality is that our Jama'ah, and myself included, we are victim to following the majority on earth. As a result, we are witnessing Western ideology being laced into the way that we choose to live. Is this not evident? In the number of Ahmadi families you'll find that feel there's no harm in celebrating Halloween, that there's no harm in attending New Year's Eve parties where people are drinking alcohol and toasting. The number of Ahmadis that rent out halls to celebrate birthday parties despite Hazur's blessed advice. The number of Ahmadis who get married and feel that they must hire a DJ and have a dance floor. Is it not evident that we're following the majority in the fact that our sisters, more and more of them, continue not to wear the hijab, or cases where hijab is worn, it's with tight-fitted clothing? Don't get me wrong, us men are no better at guarding our chastity. So many of us are clicking and swiping our way into porn addiction that has led to marital issues and divorces amongst our community. Also evident that we are following the majority is our youth, our khuddam, the uptick in the number of them piercing their ears and getting tattoos. And lastly, is it not evident in the YOLO, you only live once mentality that has hijacked our financial sacrifices that are supposed to be in the way of Allah, but they have become financial sacrifices in the way of me first, and then my vacation, my new car payment, and then, okay, if I've got anything left over, let's see if I can reach a hold at the Tariqa Jadid Secretary, Waqf Jadid, and see what I can sacrifice. Brothers and sisters, it's safe to say that many of us, myself included once on this list, maybe still, are guilty of following the masses. We are keen on wanting to fit in and keep up with these societal trends, which means we as a community are unfortunately still suffering from an inferiority complex, when in retrospect, our beloved Huzur has been consistently reminding us that if we stay true to our bath and stay committed to fulfilling the rights due to Allah in mankind, that we should have nothing to feel inferior about. In fact, in an address, he told us, rather, Huzur says, you should set an example of modesty for others to learn from and demonstrate your power, your confidence, your self-worth, he says. Your self-worth through the manifestation of faith. Certainly, if you have self-confidence and are free from all complexes about your religion, it is going to cast wide open the door of tabligh and spread Islam in this part of the world. And then more recently, in a Friday sermon given at Bath al-Rahman Mosque, Huzur reminded us that the promised Messiah, alayhi salam, desired for the light of Islam to spread through practical proofs. And each one of us has that responsibility to reflect that high standard of morality within our social circles in America. Huzur goes on to say that if we forget this code of conduct and if we do not focus on our faith, then our future generations will continue to deviate from the right path. Beloved Huzur said that maintaining a worldly mentality will render a person's pledge of allegiance to him useless. I repeat, Huzur says maintaining a worldly mentality will render your bath useless. He said that pledging allegiance to him requires one to bring a sort of death upon themselves so that they may be born into a new life. In other words, after pledging allegiance, one should come into a new spiritual life. If this is not the case, then such a bath renders no benefit whatsoever. One who does a bath, Huzur says, with true sincerity and repents with true sincerity, then Allah has mercy on them and forgives them, and it becomes as if they were granted a new life. And then in an address given just last year in the UK, beloved Huzur shared a practical and an inspiring example of self-confidence manifested through faith via our pious European and American women converts. About them, Huzur says, that they have brought about a revolutionary spiritual change in their life. They have established such high standards of modest dress that one is left amazed by them. This is something for other Ahmadis to ponder over, Huzur says. If these American or European ladies who grew up in this society and in non-Muslim homes have reached the conclusion that the way to establish their dignity and honor is through modest dress and righteous conduct, then what of those Ahmadis who originate from Muslim countries and grew up in Muslim homes? Without a shadow of a doubt, Huzur says, our Jamaat is destined to progress, inshallah. But he says, however, if you do not protect your faith and live up to the expectations and the teachings of the promised Messiah, alayhi salam, then people from other nations will join our community and will become the standard bearers of Islam in this era. They will be the ones to propagate its teachings, whilst those who come before will be left behind. He reminds us that as we have all accepted the promised Messiah, alayhi salam, and taken his bath, that we must strive to honor our pledge and ensure that worldly influences never take us away from it. In closing, allow me to take you back to the Battle of Uhud and that infamous Archer's Mountain, where beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had positioned 50 of the best archers, and I'm sure many of you know how the story goes. 40 of the 50 archers committed that fatal mistake, witnessing their brothers rejoicing in the victory of war and collecting the spoils of war. They disobeyed their commander, ran off that mountaintop to get a piece of theirs. As soon as Khalid bin Walid noticed that Archer's Mountain was left with only 10 archers, he regrouped his troops, led a counterattack from the backside, killed those remaining faithful archers, and then went on to lead a surprise attack upon the Muslim army that it's reported were so shocked and so surprised that many of them ran up the mountains of Uhud or back to their homes in Medina. It was in that critical moment, it's reported that only 10 faithful servants ran to protect the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One of those 10 was a woman by the name of Hazrat Umara radhiyallahu anha, who prior to the war pleaded with her beloved Prophet permission to fight in this war. And not only was she given permission to fight, she was tasked the assignment to provide water for wounded soldiers during the Battle of Uhud. When chaos broke out and she noticed that the Prophet Muhammad was in danger, she threw down that water pot, grabbed a sword, and ran to protect her Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Umara described this incident in her own words, that there were less than 10 men left to protect the Prophet Muhammad, and when he saw me there, fighting and defending him, he noticed I was doing it without a shield. The beloved Prophet grabbed a shield from a person that was running off and said, "Give your shield to someone that's willing to sacrifice their life and fight." On this delicate occasion, many brave men wavered, but this brave woman stood steadfast against the enemy. It's reported that during this intense battle, Hazrat Umara confronted one of the Meccans' most strongest soldiers and horsemen named Ibn Kamaya, who was making repeated attempts to kill the beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the midst of her confrontation with Ibn Kamaya, she received a sword blow in her shoulder. But in retaliation, she retaliated with so much vigor and passion, and due to her own repeated sword blows, Ibn Kamaya retreated for his own life and safety, and thus protecting the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In the aftermath of the Battle of Uhud, after the Meccans retreated back to Mecca, assuming that they had killed the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it was reported that Hazrat Umara was bleeding profusely and recovering from 12 different wounds all over her body. Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam had her bandaged under his supervision, and whilst doing so, began to proclaim the names of many Muslim brave men. But he was quoted as saying, "By God today, Umara has preceded all those men in courage." Upon hearing this, Umara said, "O Prophet of Allah, O Prophet of Allah, I would be willing to sacrifice my parents for you. All I ask is that you just please pray that we have your companionship in heaven." Prophet Muhammad raised his hands to the heavens and right then and there prayed, O Allah, make them my companions in heaven." Hazrat Umara was so ecstatic upon hearing this that she spontaneously proclaimed, "I no longer care about any suffering I will face in this world from this point forward." Brothers and sisters of faith, the choice comes down to us living in this world full of temptations and worldliness. Are we going to make the grave mistake of the 40 archers of Uhud and leave our safe haven of Khilafat for a life full of worldliness and temporary happiness? Or are we willing to step with true obedience and bring a death upon ourselves and our egos like Hazrat Umara and enter this battlefield of life with the shield of Khilafat by making sure we are listening to and obeying every maruf decision from Khalifatul Masih, by making sure we are striving to consistently fulfill the 10 conditions of our bath? Are we going to be worthy of this shield of Khilafat by making sure we are hitting that prayer mat hard and consistently and on time and filling out our salat centers and mosques and congregation? Are we going to take advantage of the spiritual treasures that have been left behind for us? I can't explain to you how many youth I come across that have yet to read even the philosophy and the teachings of Islam. Are we going to honor the Holy Quran? Read it consistently? Are we going to kill our worldly mentalities and fight the flames of materialism that we are surrounded by increasing our financial sacrifices and taking it up another notch and signing up for wasiyat? Yeah, there's levels to this game too. Are we going to make sure that Muslim television Ahmadiyya is playing in our homes and logging more hours than Netflix and YouTube? Are we going to take advantage of the opportunity we have to establish a living relationship with Khalifatul Masih, our guide, our protector, be it through letters or visits? And most importantly, are we going to make every effort to develop an ever closer relationship with Allah so that we can, inshallah, fulfill those earnest desires and prayers of Khalifatul Masih? And sooner rather than later, through God's grace, be included amongst those shining stars of the West, whose nur is prophesied to be so bright that it'll leave a spiritual trail behind for the world to follow and learn from. May Allah Ta'ala forgive us of our weaknesses. May our righteous conduct be accepted. May we take full advantage of the shield we have before us of Khilafat. May we honor it. May it be that we're protected and forgiven of our weaknesses. Inshallah, ameen. Jazakumullah.